When 73-year-old William Bill Crawford offered his basement shelter to a stranded military historian during Wisconsin's worst ice storm in decades, he never imagined it would lead to discovering classified World War II intelligence documents. Beneath his century-old farmhouse, documents that had been hidden for 80 years and contained Nazi sabotage plans worth $47 million to national security agencies, transforming him from a struggling dairy farmer facing foreclosure into the guardian of one of America's most significant wartime discoveries. Before we dive into this incredible story, let us know what state you're watching from in the comments. And if this story amazes you, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we've got another mind-blowing story about a librarian who found a coded message in a donated book that led to a $23 million treasure hunt. At 73 years old, William Bill Crawford was staring at the mathematical impossibility of saving his family's 127-year-old dairy farm as he sat in his drafty kitchen on a bone-chilling February morning in 2024, surrounded by foreclosure, notices from Farmers First Bank, overdue veterinary bills he couldn't afford, and a property tax assessment that had just delivered the final blow to everything his family had built since 1897 in the rolling hills of Jefferson County, Wisconsin. The certified letter from the bank lay open beside his morning coffee like an agricultural death warrant, its corporate language reducing 4 generations of Crawford family farming to a series of missed mortgage payments and legal procedures. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. The header screamed in bold red letters, followed by the devastating mathematics of generational failure. $178,000 in accumulated farm debt, $43,000 in property taxes over the past 2 years, and exactly 45 precise days to somehow produce money that Bill knew he didn't have and couldn't possibly raise in time to save the 640-acre dairy operation that had been in his family since his great-grandfather. Heinrich Crawford had immigrated from Germany and purchased the land with his life savings in 1897. The farmhouse where Bill had lived his entire life sat like a weathered monument to American agricultural resilience in a valley that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless family farms throughout Jefferson County. Built from local fieldstone and oak timber by Heinrich Crawford in 1899, the house had sheltered 4 generations of Crawford farmers who had believed that hard work, honest dealing, and careful stewardship of the land could overcome any challenge that Wisconsin winters and volatile dairy markets might present. Its thick stone foundation and sturdy construction had protected families through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, multiple farm crises, and economic downturns that had destroyed neighboring operations throughout the 20th century. The original homestead that Heinrich Crawford had established reflected the practical German engineering and agricultural expertise that he had brought with him from the Black Forest region of Baden-Württemberg, where his family had operated dairy farms for over 2 centuries before economic hardship and political instability had forced him to seek opportunities in America. Heinrich had chosen the Jefferson County location specifically because the rolling hills, reliable water sources, and rich soil reminded him of the landscape he had known in Germany, and he had invested every dollar of his $850 life savings into purchasing 160 acres that he believed could support a sustainable dairy operation using the agricultural methods he had learned from generations of German farmers. But those solid stone walls and German engineering couldn't protect Bill from the convergence of economic and regulatory pressures that were now threatening to end his family's 127-year presence on land that had sustained them through every previous crisis. The mortgage that was strangling his family's future had been necessary 8 years earlier, when a combination of equipment failures, herd disease, and plummeting milk prices had consumed their savings. forcing Bill to leverage their land against loans that had seemed manageable when dairy farming was still profitable for small-scale family operations in Wisconsin. Bill's monthly income from their 67-head Holstein dairy herd had dropped from $8,400 during the profitable years of the early 2010s to barely $3,200 during the current market crisis that was affecting small dairy farmers throughout Wisconsin and the entire Midwest. The farm that had once been featured in Wisconsin Agriculturist magazine as a model of sustainable family dairy operations was now generating insufficient revenue to cover basic operating expenses, let alone service the debt that was consuming their ability to maintain equipment, feed their cattle, and keep up with the increasingly complex regulatory requirements that made modern dairy farming expensive and bureaucratically challenging for elderly farmers operating without hired help. The dairy industry crisis that was destroying the Crawford farm was part of a larger economic transformation that was making small-scale family farming increasingly difficult to sustain in competition with massive corporate agricultural operations that could achieve economies of scale impossible for individual farmers. Wisconsin had lost over 2,800 dairy farms during the past decade, with most small operations being absorbed by larger companies or simply abandoned when families could no longer generate sufficient income to justify the enormous time investment and financial risks associated with modern agricultural operations. Meanwhile, Bill's fixed expenses continued requiring $11,200 per month, regardless of whether the Wisconsin dairy market could support a sustainable family farming operation. The mortgage payment alone consumed $4,300 monthly. Property taxes demanded another $1,800 quarterly, and the basic costs of maintaining equipment, feeding their herd, keeping utilities connected, meeting federal dairy regulations, and covering the expensive liability insurance required for commercial dairy operations created a monthly budget shortfall that had been steadily consuming their ability to maintain their rural lifestyle and agricultural legacy. The specific financial pressures that were destroying Bill's operation reflected the impossible economics that small dairy farmers faced throughout the Midwest. Feed costs had increased 47% over the past 3 years, while milk prices had remained essentially flat, creating a cost-price squeeze that made profitable operations nearly impossible for farms with fewer than 200 head of cattle. The Crawford farm's 67 Holstein cows were producing approximately 1,150 gallons of milk per day, which generated gross revenue of about $3,200 monthly at current commodity prices. But the cost of feed, veterinary care, utilities, equipment maintenance, and regulatory compliance consumed nearly $2,900 of that revenue, leaving barely $300 monthly profit margin that was insufficient to service debt, maintain facilities, or provide living expenses for Bill and his wife Martha. Martha Crawford, Bill's wife of 48 years, had been forced to take a part-time job at the Jefferson County Library to supplement their farm income, earning $1,200 monthly that helped cover household expenses but was insufficient to address their underlying financial crisis. At 69 years old, Martha was working 25 hours per week while also helping with farm operations, managing the household, and caring for Bill's increasingly severe arthritis that was making the physical demands of dairy farming more difficult for him to handle without assistance. The dairy operation that Bill managed single-handedly represented an enormous daily commitment that began at 4:30 a.m. with the first milking and continued until 8 p.m. with the final check on the herd, equipment maintenance, and preparation for the following day's operations. The 67 Holstein cows required milking twice daily, with each milking session taking approximately 2.5 hours using the semi-automated equipment that Bill had purchased in 2018 with borrowed money that was now part of their crushing debt burden. The physical demands of dairy farming were becoming increasingly difficult for Bill to manage as his arthritis progressed and his energy levels declined with age. Each morning, Bill struggled with joint pain that made gripping milking equipment painful, while the repetitive motions required for feed distribution, equipment maintenance, and facility cleaning created daily discomfort that over-the-counter pain medications could barely address. Bill had resisted his doctor's recommendations to reduce his physical activity because he understood that the farm operation required constant attention and that hiring help would eliminate their already minimal profit margins. The veterinary expenses that were contributing to their financial crisis reflected both the demanding health requirements of modern dairy operations and a series of unfortunate circumstances that had consumed their emergency savings. During the previous year, Bill had spent $23,000 on veterinary care for herd health issues, including $8,700 to treat a bacterial infection that had affected 15 cows, $6,300 for reproductive health services and artificial insemination, and $7,800 for routine vaccinations, testing and preventive care required by federal dairy regulations and organic certification standards. The equipment failures that had triggered their current financial crisis began in March 2023, when their primary milking system had suffered a catastrophic pump failure that had required emergency replacement at a cost of $34,000, followed in June by the failure of their bulk milk cooling tank that had cost $28,000 to replace. Both pieces of equipment were essential for daily operations and couldn't be repaired economically, forcing Bill to finance their replacement through emergency loans at interest rates that reflected his deteriorating creditworthiness, and the bank's assessment that small dairy operations represented high-risk investments. The organic certification that the Crawford farm had maintained since 2019 was intended to provide premium pricing that would improve their financial situation. But the additional costs and regulatory requirements associated with organic dairy production had proven more expensive than the price premiums could offset. Organic feed costs were 60% higher than conventional alternatives. Organic healthcare protocols were more expensive and time-consuming, and the paperwork and inspection requirements for maintaining organic certification consumed time and resources that Bill struggled to provide while managing all other aspects of the farm operation. Bill's efforts to diversify their farm income through agritourism, direct sales, and value-added products had generated modest supplementary revenue but were insufficient to address their fundamental profitability problems. Their farm store, which Martha operated during summer months, generated approximately $2,800 annually through sales of fresh milk, eggs, and seasonal produce to local customers who appreciated supporting family farms. But the time investment required for direct marketing and customer service made these activities marginally profitable when Bill's labor costs were calculated. The federal and state agricultural assistance programs that were theoretically available to help struggling family farmers had proven largely ineffective for addressing the Crawford farm's specific financial crisis. The Wisconsin Emergency Farm Assistance Program had provided Bill with a one-time grant of $3,500 that had covered feed costs for 6 weeks, but couldn't address their underlying debt service problems or equipment replacement needs. The USDA Farm Service Agency had placed them on a waiting list for emergency loans that currently had 347 applicants ahead of them, with an estimated processing time of 14 months for applications that met eligibility requirements that seemed designed to exclude most family farms facing immediate financial distress. The emotional toll of their financial crisis was affecting both Bill and Martha's physical and mental health in ways that made their daily responsibilities more difficult to manage effectively. Bill had developed stress-related insomnia that left him exhausted during physically demanding farm work, while Martha was experiencing anxiety symptoms that affected her concentration at the library and her ability to manage the complex paperwork associated with their farm's regulatory compliance requirements. Both were avoiding social activities and community events where they might encounter neighbors who were aware of their financial difficulties, creating isolation that compounded their stress and reduced their access to informal support networks that had traditionally helped rural families through difficult periods. The prospect of losing their family farm represented more than just financial failure for Bill and Martha. It meant the end of a way of life that had shaped their identity and provided meaning to their work for over 40 years of marriage. The farm had been their home since 1976, when Bill had returned from military service to help his father manage the operation that his grandfather had established. Every building, every field, and every piece of equipment represented memories of family milestones, seasonal celebrations, and shared accomplishments that had created deep emotional connections to their property and their agricultural lifestyle. The Crawford family cemetery, located in a grove of oak trees behind the main barn, contained the graves of Heinrich Crawford, his wife Anna, their son Wilhelm, and Bill's parents, Robert and Elizabeth Crawford, whose headstones told the story of German-American agricultural success and family perseverance through multiple generations of economic challenges. The thought of losing the farm meant abandoning not only their home and livelihood, but also their responsibility as caretakers of family history and guardians of agricultural traditions that had sustained their family for over a century. The broader community impact of the Crawford farm's potential closure reflected the economic and social disruption that was affecting rural Wisconsin, as small family farms were replaced by larger corporate operations or simply abandoned when economic pressures made continued operation unsustainable. The Jefferson County agricultural economy had lost 18 family farms during the past 5 years, eliminating not only agricultural production, but also the local spending, employment, and community leadership that family farmers traditionally provided to rural communities. Bill's leadership roles in the Jefferson County Farm Bureau, the Wisconsin Holstein Association, and the Jefferson Lutheran Church represented community connections and civic responsibilities that would be lost if financial pressures forced him to sell the farm and relocate to a situation where he could afford housing and basic living expenses on his Social Security income. His expertise in sustainable dairy production methods and his knowledge of local agricultural history made him a valuable resource for younger farmers and agricultural extension programs. But his financial crisis was preventing him from continuing. These community contributions, the farm's organic certification and sustainable production methods had made the Crawford operation a demonstration site for agricultural students from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who visited annually to study small-scale dairy production techniques and sustainable farming practices. Professor Janet Miller from the UW Agricultural Extension Program had featured the Crawford farm in research publications about family farm sustainability and had nominated Bill for recognition from the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture for his contributions to sustainable agriculture education and rural community development. But educational recognition and community respect couldn't address the mathematical impossibility of Bill's financial situation. Even if he could somehow eliminate all discretionary expenses and reduce operating costs to absolute minimums, his farm's revenue capacity was insufficient to service their current debt while maintaining compliance with regulatory requirements and providing basic living expenses for him and Martha. The economics of small-scale dairy farming in Wisconsin had fundamentally changed in ways that made continued operation impossible, regardless of management efficiency, cost control measures, or additional income sources. The crisis that now threatened to destroy their Wisconsin sanctuary had begun 18 months earlier, when a combination of equipment failures, veterinary emergencies, and collapsing milk prices had eliminated their operating capital and forced them into the spiral of debt that was now threatening their housing security and the continuation of a family tradition that had defined their identity for over a century. Bill Crawford had exhausted every resource available to elderly farmers and rural families in Wisconsin, applying for emergency assistance programs through the State Department of Agriculture, disaster relief programs through FEMA, and agricultural support programs through the USDA. Most programs had waiting lists of 8 months or longer, required documentation that was difficult for small-scale operations to provide, or offered amounts so small that they barely covered a week's worth of feed costs, while doing nothing to address the underlying crisis that was making family dairy farming economically unsustainable in the current agricultural marketplace. At 73 years old, with arthritis in his hands that made milking increasingly painful and no children who were interested in continuing the farming operation, Bill was facing the reality that his foreclosure might represent not just personal financial failure, but the end of a way of life that had sustained his family and shaped their community for over a century. His son Michael lived in Minneapolis and worked as a software engineer, while his daughter Susan was a high school teacher in Milwaukee, both pursuing careers that offered better financial security and professional opportunities than small-scale farming could provide in the contemporary agricultural economy. The farmhouse that had been Bill's home for 73 years contained not only the furniture, photographs, and personal belongings that represented a lifetime of memories, but also the structural elements and hidden spaces that Heinrich Crawford had created during the original construction in 1899. The thick fieldstone foundation, hand-hewn oak timbers, and solid construction techniques reflected German building traditions that emphasized durability, functionality, and careful craftsmanship, but also included design features that Heinrich had incorporated for reasons that subsequent generations had never fully understood or investigated. As Bill sat in his kitchen on this cold February morning, calculating whether selling their remaining equipment might generate enough cash to delay foreclosure for a few additional months, he was unaware that the simple farmhouse where he had lived his entire life contained secrets that would soon attract the attention of federal agencies, military historians, and government officials whose interest in his property would exceed anything that 4 generations of Crawford farmers had ever imagined possible. But Bill Crawford had no idea that within hours, a stranger's emergency would set in motion a discovery that would transform his desperate situation into a national security matter, involving classified documents, historical preservation, and government compensation that would not only save his farm, but provide resources that would secure his family's future while contributing to America's understanding of World War II intelligence operations that had remained secret for over 8 decades. The ice storm that was beginning to coat Jefferson County with dangerous accumulations of freezing rain was about to bring more than just weather-related challenges to the Crawford farm. Hidden beneath the floorboards that Heinrich Crawford had Carefully installed in 1899 lay evidence of wartime activities that would explain why a German immigrant farmer had chosen this particular location, why he had built his house with such unusual structural features, and why certain rooms in the basement had remained locked and unused throughout 4 generations of family occupation. The mathematical impossibility of Bill's current financial situation was about to become irrelevant, as discoveries beneath his kitchen floor would reveal that Heinrich Crawford had been more than just a German immigrant seeking agricultural opportunities. In Wisconsin, he had been a man with secrets, connections, and responsibilities that had shaped every decision he made about location, construction, and family security during the most dangerous period in modern American history. The Crawford family's presence in Jefferson County, Wisconsin, began with a journey shrouded in far more complexity than Bill had ever understood. When his great-grandfather, Heinrich Crawford, arrived in America in 1897 with considerably more than the $850 in life savings that family stories had always claimed, carrying with him not just dreams of agricultural prosperity, but knowledge, connections, and responsibilities that would remain hidden for over a century beneath the floorboards of the farmhouse he would build with such unusual care and mysterious structural features. Heinrich Crawford's true identity had been far more sophisticated than the simple German immigrant farmer that subsequent generations had believed him to be. Born Heinrich Kruger in 1864 in the Black Forest region of Baden-Württemberg, he had been educated at the prestigious Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, where he had studied mechanical engineering and precision manufacturing before accepting a position with the Krupp Steel Works in Essen, where his expertise in metallurgy and industrial processes had brought him to the attention of German military procurement officers who were modernizing their weapons manufacturing capabilities during the 1880s and early 1890s. Heinrich's work at Krupp had involved not just civilian manufacturing, but classified military contracts that had provided him with detailed knowledge of German weapon systems, ammunition production methods, and strategic military planning that the German General Staff considered essential to their national defense capabilities. His engineering expertise had been particularly valuable for developing improved artillery shells, rifle ammunition, and the precision manufacturing techniques that were revolutionizing military weapons production throughout Europe during the decade preceding what would become World War I. But Heinrich Kruger's transformation into Heinrich Crawford had been necessitated by political complications that had made his continued residence in Germany both personally dangerous and professionally impossible. His romantic relationship with Anna Richter, the daughter of a prominent Social Democratic Party leader who was advocating for workers' rights and opposing German military expansion, had created suspicions among his military supervisors about his political loyalties and his reliability for continued work on classified weapons projects. The political tensions that had forced Heinrich to leave Germany were part of broader social and economic upheavals that were affecting the entire German-speaking regions of Central Europe during the 1890s. Chancellor Otto von Bismarck's dismissal by Kaiser Wilhelm II in 1890 had created political instability that was affecting everyone associated with German military industries, while growing labor unrest and socialist political movements were creating suspicions about the loyalty of workers who had family connections to political opposition groups. Heinrich's decision to emigrate to America had been motivated not just by economic opportunities, but by his growing discomfort with German military policies and his desire to escape political surveillance that was making his personal life increasingly difficult. His engineering knowledge and manufacturing expertise were valuable enough that German authorities would have preferred to prevent his emigration, but his relationship with Anna Richter and his suspected sympathy for democratic political movements had made him a security risk that military officials preferred to see removed from sensitive weapons production rather than risk potential intelligence compromises. The elaborate planning that had been necessary for Heinrich and Anna to leave Germany safely had involved coordination with German-American immigrant networks that specialized in helping political refugees and skilled workers relocate to America. While avoiding the surveillance and travel restrictions that German authorities imposed on individuals with access to military-industrial information, the Lutheran Church connections that had facilitated their immigration had also provided them with new identities, documentation, and financial resources that exceeded what a simple farmer could have accumulated through agricultural work. Anna Richter had become Anna Crawford when she married Heinrich during their Atlantic crossing in 1897, using wedding ceremony documentation provided by Lutheran Church officials who understood the political necessity of establishing new identities. For German immigrants who needed to avoid political persecution or military service obligations that could force their return to Germany. The 850 in life savings that family stories attributed to Heinrich's agricultural background had actually been provided by German-American business networks that invested in skilled immigrants who could contribute to American industrial development, while providing information about European manufacturing techniques and military technologies. The location that Heinrich had chosen for his Wisconsin homestead had been selected not just for its agricultural potential, but for its strategic position relative to railroad transportation, telegraph communications, and the German-American communities that were establishing themselves throughout the Midwest during the 1890s. Jefferson County's proximity to Milwaukee's industrial centers and its location along railroad routes that connected to major American cities had made it an ideal location for someone who needed to maintain communications with both German-American networks and potentially with contacts in Germany who shared his concerns about German military policies. The farmhouse that Heinrich had constructed beginning in 1899 had incorporated design features that reflected not just German building traditions, but specific security and concealment capabilities that suggested purposes beyond typical agricultural residential construction. The unusually thick fieldstone foundation had been built with hidden compartments and structural voids that could accommodate storage of documents, equipment, or other materials that Heinrich wanted to protect from discovery by authorities who might investigate his background or activities. The basement construction had included rooms that were accessible only through concealed entrances, ventilation systems that were more sophisticated than typical root cellars required, and structural reinforcement that suggested preparation for storage of materials that might be heavy, valuable, or requiring protection from moisture, temperature fluctuations, or unauthorized access. The hand-hewn oak timbers that supported the house had been joined using traditional German carpentry techniques that created exceptionally strong and durable construction, but also included hidden channels and compartments that were invisible, unless someone understood the specific construction methods that Heinrich had employed. Heinrich's agricultural operations during his first years in Wisconsin had been successful enough to justify his land purchases and facility construction. But his farming expertise had been supplemented by income from consulting work that he provided to American manufacturers who were interested in German industrial techniques and precision manufacturing methods. His knowledge of metallurgy, mechanical engineering, and production processes had made him a valuable consultant for American companies that were competing with European manufacturers and seeking to improve their product quality and manufacturing efficiency. The timing of Heinrich's arrival in America had coincided with rapid American industrial expansion that created enormous demand for skilled immigrants who could contribute technical expertise and manufacturing knowledge that American companies needed to compete in global markets. Heinrich's background with Krupp Steel Works had provided him with credentials that opened opportunities for consulting contracts with American steel producers, weapons manufacturers, and precision machinery companies that were eager to learn European manufacturing techniques. But Heinrich's consulting work had also brought him to the attention of American military officials who were interested in his knowledge of German weapons systems and manufacturing capabilities. The Spanish-American War of 1898 had demonstrated American military weaknesses and had created urgent interest in improving American weapons production and military preparedness that made Heinrich's expertise valuable to you. Army Ordnance Department officials who were studying European military technologies and seeking to modernize American military capabilities. The consulting contracts that Heinrich had accepted with American military contractors during the early 1900s had provided him with income that supplemented his agricultural operations, while also creating relationships with American military officials who valued his insights into German military capabilities and strategic planning. His work had involved not just technical consultation about weapons manufacturing, but intelligence assessments about German military preparations and strategic intentions that were becoming increasingly important as European political tensions escalated. Heinrich's marriage to Anna and their establishment of the Crawford farm had provided them with the social integration and community acceptance that was essential for German immigrants who wanted to demonstrate their loyalty to America, while avoiding suspicions about their political backgrounds or potential connections to German government interests. Their participation in Jefferson Lutheran Church, their involvement in local agricultural organizations, and their reputation as hard-working and reliable neighbors had created the community standing that protected them from the anti-German sentiment that would affect many German Americans during World War I. The birth of Heinrich and Anna's son Wilhelm in 1900 had strengthened their integration into American society, while also creating additional motivations for Heinrich to ensure that his family's future would not be threatened by political complications or questions about his background and activities during his years in Germany. Wilhelm's American citizenship and his upbringing as a Wisconsin farmer's son had represented Heinrich's successful transformation from German military contractor to American agricultural pioneer. Wilhelm Crawford's education and development during the early 1900s had been carefully managed by Heinrich to ensure that his son would have both the practical skills necessary for successful farming and the technical knowledge that could provide opportunities for advancement in American industrial or professional careers. Heinrich had insisted that Wilhelm learn not just agricultural techniques, but also mechanical engineering, precision manufacturing, and business management skills that reflected Heinrich's understanding that American economic success required technical competence and entrepreneurial capability. The farming operation that Heinrich had established by 1910 had included not just dairy cattle and crop production, but also a sophisticated workshop where he continued his consulting work and developed manufacturing techniques that he licensed to American companies. His workshop had contained precision machinery, specialized tools, and technical equipment that exceeded what typical farms required, reflecting his continued involvement in manufacturing and engineering projects that supplemented their agricultural income. Heinrich's workshop had also served as a meeting place for German-American business networks and professional associations that facilitated communication and cooperation among skilled German immigrants who were contributing to American industrial development while maintaining cultural connections and mutual support relationships. These networks had provided Heinrich with ongoing access to information about German political and military developments that was valuable for his consulting work with American military contractors and government officials. The outbreak of World War in 1914 had created enormous complications for Heinrich's position as a German-American consultant working with American military contractors. Anti-German sentiment and suspicions about German-American loyalty had made his consulting relationships politically sensitive, while his knowledge of German military capabilities had become increasingly valuable to American officials who were preparing for potential American involvement in the European conflict. Heinrich's response to these wartime pressures had been to intensify his cooperation with American military officials, while documenting his knowledge of German military systems and strategic planning in detailed reports and technical analyses that would demonstrate his loyalty to America and his commitment to supporting American military preparedness. His workshop had become a center for developing American improvements to weapons systems and manufacturing processes based on his knowledge of German military technologies. The intelligence work that Heinrich had undertaken for American military officials during World War I had involved not just technical consultation, but active communication with German-American networks that were monitoring German military activities and political developments. His role had expanded from technical consultant to intelligence coordinator, facilitating the collection and analysis of information about German strategic planning and military capabilities that was essential for American military decision-making. But Heinrich's intelligence activities had also created security requirements that had necessitated elaborate precautions for protecting sensitive documents, communication equipment, and other materials that could compromise American military operations if they were discovered by German agents or sympathizers. The hidden compartments and concealed storage areas that Heinrich had built into his farmhouse foundation had been designed to accommodate these security requirements while maintaining the appearance of a typical Wisconsin dairy farm. The classified documents and technical materials that Heinrich had accumulated during his intelligence work had included not just his own reports and analyses, but also German military documents, technical specifications, and strategic planning materials that had been obtained through German-American intelligence networks. The value and sensitivity of these materials had required storage methods that would protect them from discovery, damage, or theft, while ensuring that they remained accessible for Heinrich's ongoing intelligence work. Heinrich's death in 1923 had occurred before he could transfer his intelligence responsibilities to other American officials or properly dispose of the classified materials that had accumulated in his hidden storage areas. The sudden nature of his death from pneumonia had prevented him from providing his son Wilhelm with information about the location or significance of materials that remained concealed in the farmhouse foundation and basement areas. Wilhelm Crawford's inheritance of the farm in 1923 had included not just agricultural operations and property ownership, but also unknown responsibilities as the custodian of classified intelligence materials that would remain hidden and forgotten for over a century. Wilhelm's focus on agricultural success and his lack of knowledge about his father's intelligence activities had meant that Heinrich's wartime contributions and the sensitive materials he had accumulated were lost to historical record and government awareness. The farmhouse that Wilhelm had inherited and subsequently passed to his son Robert and then to Bill had continued to conceal Heinrich's intelligence legacy while serving as the foundation for 4 generations of successful agricultural operations. The hidden compartments and concealed storage areas that Heinrich had constructed had remained undisturbed and undiscovered, protecting materials that documented American intelligence operations and German military planning that had shaped the outcome of World War I. The structural modifications that Heinrich had made to accommodate his intelligence work had been so skillfully concealed within traditional German construction techniques that subsequent generations had never suspected that their farmhouse contained anything more than excellent craftsmanship and durable building materials. The oak timber framing, fieldstone foundation, and careful finish work had hidden Heinrich's security features while providing the functional agricultural residence that had supported 4 generations of Crawford family farming. Bill Crawford's current financial crisis and his desperate search for any assets that might help save the farm had brought him closer than any previous generation to discovering Heinrich's hidden legacy. But even his careful examination of the farmhouse structure and his consideration of selling architectural materials or antique building components had not revealed the sophisticated concealment techniques that Heinrich had employed to protect his intelligence materials. The ice storm that was beginning to affect Jefferson County on this February evening was about to create circumstances that would finally expose Heinrich's carefully hidden secrets, revealing that the Crawford family's agricultural legacy had been built upon foundations that contained some of the most significant undiscovered intelligence materials from America's World War I era, materials that would transform their financial crisis into a national security discovery of extraordinary historical and economic value. But Bill Crawford had no idea that the stranger's emergency that would soon bring a military historian to his door would set in motion discoveries that would validate Heinrich's intelligence contributions while revealing that his great-grandfather had been far more than a German immigrant farmer. He had been an American intelligence operative whose wartime service had remained classified and unrecognized for over a century, and whose hidden legacy was about to save the farm that Heinrich had built to protect secrets that would change American understanding of World War I intelligence operations. It was 3:47 p.m. on that bone-chilling February afternoon when the sound of a struggling engine first penetrated the ominous silence that had settled over the Crawford farm as the worst ice storm in Wisconsin's recorded history began coating Jefferson County with a deadly glaze that was making travel increasingly treacherous and forcing emergency services to issue warnings for people to remain indoors until conditions improved. Bill was in his barn, checking on the Holstein herd and ensuring that their water systems wouldn't freeze during the storm, when he heard what sounded like a vehicle in serious mechanical distress laboring up County Road K, the engine straining against what appeared to be both mechanical problems and the hazardous driving conditions that were making even short-distance travel extremely dangerous. The temperature had dropped to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, while freezing rain continued accumulating on every surface, creating ice conditions that were pushing both human endurance and automotive systems beyond their safe operating limits. Bill had been monitoring weather forecasts throughout the day, understanding that ice storms posed particular dangers for elderly farmers who might lose power, heating, or access to emergency services if conditions continued deteriorating, as meteorologists were predicting for Jefferson County and surrounding areas of southern Wisconsin. Martha was in the kitchen, preparing emergency supplies and checking their backup heating sources, while monitoring radio broadcasts that were providing updates about road closures, power outages, and emergency shelter locations for residents who might need assistance during the storm. The couple had experienced severe winter weather throughout their decades of farming, but the combination of ice accumulation and sustained freezing rain was creating conditions that exceeded anything they had encountered during their 48 years of marriage and agricultural operations. The engine noise grew louder and more erratic as the vehicle approached their farm driveway, accompanied by the distinctive sounds of tires struggling for traction on ice and the grinding noise of mechanical components that were failing under the extreme cold and challenging driving conditions. Bill walked toward the front of their property, moving carefully on the ice-covered ground, and saw a dark blue Honda CR-V approaching their gate, with steam pouring from its hood and hazard lights flashing in patterns that clearly indicated serious mechanical distress and an emergency situation. The vehicle was a 2019 Honda CR-V that belonged to Dr. Rebecca Morgan, a 42-year-old military historian and intelligence analyst who worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency and specialized in World War I and World War II German-American intelligence operations. Dr. Morgan had been driving from a research conference at the University of Wisconsin-Madison to her home in Milwaukee when the ice storm had created mechanical problems with her vehicle's cooling system, while also making the highways too dangerous for continued travel at normal speeds. Dr. Morgan's professional background included advanced degrees in military history from Georgetown University and intelligence analysis training from the Defense Intelligence Agency's specialized programs for civilian analysts who worked on classified historical research projects. Her expertise in German-American intelligence networks during both World Wars had made her one of the leading authorities on immigration patterns, communication methods, and operational techniques used by German immigrants who had provided intelligence services to American military officials during periods of international conflict. The research conference that Dr. Morgan had been attending at UW-Madison had focused on recently declassified intelligence documents from World War I that were revealing previously unknown details about German-American cooperation with American military authorities and the sophisticated intelligence networks that had operated throughout the Midwest during the early 20th century. Her presentation had discussed newly discovered evidence of German immigrant involvement in American intelligence operations that had been far more extensive and sophisticated than historians had previously understood. As Dr. Morgan's disabled vehicle reached the Crawford farm gate, Bill could see that she was clearly experiencing an emergency situation that had forced her to seek help at the first property she could reach along the increasingly treacherous rural highway that connected small communities throughout Jefferson County. Her vehicle's radiator was overheating despite the cold temperature, creating clouds of steam that were making visibility difficult, while warning lights on her dashboard were indicating multiple system failures that had brought her emergency to a complete halt just as driving conditions were becoming life-threatening. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry to bother you during this storm," Dr. Morgan called out as she carefully climbed from her steaming vehicle, her professional demeanor remaining calm despite obvious stress about both her mechanical problems and the dangerous weather conditions. "My car has broken down, and I'm concerned about staying safe during this ice storm. Would it be possible to use your phone to call for assistance and perhaps wait inside until help arrives or conditions improve enough for safe travel?" Bill looked at this woman, recognizing the kind of genuine distress and professional competence that reflected someone who was accustomed to managing difficult situations, but was currently facing circumstances beyond her control. Despite his family's own desperate financial situation, Bill's instinctive response to people in emergency situations reflected the rural Wisconsin values and community cooperation that had shaped 4 generations of Crawford farmers who had survived harsh winters through mutual assistance and neighborly support. "Of course," Bill replied immediately, opening their gate and gesturing toward the warm lights of their farmhouse. "Let's get you inside where it's warm, and we'll figure out what we can do about your car and the storm. I'm Bill Crawford, and this is our farm. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, until it's safe to travel again." Dr. Morgan introduced herself as she carefully made her way across the ice-covered driveway toward the Crawford farmhouse, explaining that she was a researcher returning from an academic conference and expressing gratitude for assistance that could literally be life-saving, given the combination of mechanical failure and dangerous weather conditions. Her professional training had taught her to remain calm during crisis situations, but she was obviously relieved to find help from people who understood the seriousness of winter emergency situations in rural Wisconsin. Bill helped Dr. Morgan carry her research materials and personal belongings from her disabled vehicle to the safety and warmth of their farmhouse, where Martha immediately provided hot coffee, warm towels, and access to their telephone for calling emergency assistance, or family members who might be worried about her safety during the storm. The Crawford family's hospitality reflected decades of rural living experience that had taught them the importance of helping stranded travelers and the community cooperation that was essential for survival during severe weather emergencies. Mrs. Crawford, Mr. Crawford, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your kindness, Dr. Morgan said, as she gratefully accepted the hot coffee and warm environment that Martha provided. This storm caught everyone by surprise with how quickly conditions deteriorated, and your assistance may literally be saving my life. I was becoming very concerned about my safety when my car broke down. As Dr. Morgan waited for road conditions to improve sufficiently for towing services to operate safely, she found herself in conversation with Bill and Martha about their farm, their family history, and the challenges facing agricultural operations in contemporary Wisconsin. Her academic background and professional training had given her extensive knowledge about rural American history and the immigrant communities that had shaped agricultural development throughout the Midwest during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Mr. Crawford, Dr. Morgan said, as she examined the historical photographs and family documents that were displayed throughout the Crawford farmhouse. Your family's story seems to reflect many of the German immigrant experiences that I study. In my professional research, the late 1890s were a particularly interesting period for German immigration to Wisconsin, especially for skilled workers and individuals who had technical expertise that was valuable for American industrial development. Dr. Morgan's academic expertise in German-American immigration patterns and her professional knowledge of World War I intelligence operations had trained her to recognize historical indicators and family stories that might reflect more complex backgrounds than typical agricultural immigrant experiences. The timing of Heinrich Crawford's arrival, the location he had chosen for his homestead, and the unusual construction features of their farmhouse were creating professional curiosity about the Crawford family history that went beyond polite conversation. During her emergency shelter, Bill found himself sharing family stories and historical information about Heinrich Crawford's immigration, his agricultural success, and the farmhouse construction techniques that had created such durable and well-designed buildings using traditional German carpentry and stonework methods. Bill's knowledge of his family history was extensive, but he had never discussed Heinrich's background with someone who had professional expertise in German-American immigration and the historical context of late 19th century settlement patterns. The construction techniques and building materials that your great-grandfather used are quite sophisticated for typical agricultural buildings of that era, Dr. Morgan observed as she examined the oak timber framing and fieldstone foundation, work that was visible throughout the farmhouse. The quality of craftsmanship and the structural design suggests someone with considerable technical expertise and construction knowledge that exceeded what most farmers would have possessed. As their conversation continued, Dr. Morgan began sharing her professional research about German immigrant communities in Wisconsin and the various roles that skilled immigrants had played in American industrial and agricultural development during the period when Heinrich Crawford had established his farm. Her knowledge of German-American business networks, professional associations, and community organizations provided historical context that helped Bill understand his family's story within broader patterns of immigrant success and community development. Dr. Morgan, Bill said, his curiosity growing about the historical significance of his family's background. "You seem to know a great deal about German immigrants and their contributions to Wisconsin." Heinrich left very few personal documents or detailed information about his life in Germany, but he was obviously a skilled craftsman and successful farmer. "Do you think there might be ways to learn more about his background or the techniques he used for construction and agricultural operations?" Dr. Morgan's professional training and research experience had taught her to recognize indicators of historical significance that might warrant further investigation, and her conversation with Bill was revealing family history details that suggested Heinrich Crawford's background might have been more complex and sophisticated than typical German immigrant farmer experiences. The timing of his immigration, his apparent technical expertise, and the unusual construction features of their farmhouse were creating professional interest that went beyond casual historical curiosity. "Mr. Crawford," Dr. Morgan said, "there are definitely research methods and historical resources that could provide more information about your great-grandfather's background and activities. The German immigration records, professional association memberships, and business connections from that era are quite well documented, and someone with Heinrich's apparent skills and success would likely have left historical traces that could be discovered through systematic research." As the ice storm continued and road conditions remained too dangerous for Dr. Morgan to continue her travel, she found herself spending additional time examining the Crawford farmhouse structure and learning more about Heinrich's construction techniques and the unusual design features that had attracted her professional attention. Her academic training in historical research and her intelligence analysis background had taught her to recognize architectural and construction details that might reflect purposes or requirements beyond typical residential building needs. The basement areas of the Crawford farmhouse were particularly interesting to Dr. Morgan's professional expertise, especially the thick fieldstone walls, the sophisticated ventilation systems, and the structural elements that seemed designed for storage or protection of materials that might require security measures beyond typical agricultural storage needs. Her questions about the basement construction and Heinrich's design choices were revealing details that Bill had never considered significant, but that reflected unusual construction features for typical farming operations. "Mr. Crawford," Dr. Morgan said, as Bill showed her through the basement areas where they stored farm equipment and seasonal materials. "Some of these construction features are quite unusual for agricultural buildings from that time period. The ventilation systems and structural reinforcement suggest that Heinrich designed these spaces for specific purposes that might have required protection from moisture, temperature fluctuations, or security concerns that exceeded typical farming storage requirements." Bill's tour of the basement areas had been motivated by his desire to be a good host and his interest in Dr. Morgan's professional knowledge about historical construction techniques. But her observations about unusual structural features were making him more aware of design elements that he had always accepted as examples of Heinrich's thorough and skilled craftsmanship. Dr. Morgan's questions were encouraging Bill to examine his farmhouse with new perspectives and to consider whether Heinrich's construction choices might have reflected purposes that subsequent generations had never understood. The conversation about Heinrich's construction techniques and design choices had naturally led to discussions about other aspects of the farmhouse that might reflect unusual features or historical significance. Dr. Morgan's professional curiosity about German immigrant communities and her expertise in World War I-era intelligence operations had created interest in any historical documents, family papers, or construction details that might provide insights into Heinrich's background and activities during his early years in Wisconsin. "Dr. Morgan," Bill said, Heinrich was obviously a man who planned carefully and built things to last, but he left very few personal documents or detailed information about his background. After he died in 1923, my grandfather Wilhelm focused on farming and never seemed particularly interested in preserving historical information about Heinrich's life in Germany or his early years establishing the farm. Dr. Morgan's research experience had taught her that valuable historical information was often preserved in unexpected locations, and that careful examination of buildings, storage areas, and family properties could reveal documents, artifacts, or construction features that provided insights into immigrant experiences and activities that had not been recorded in obvious places. Her professional training encouraged systematic investigation of historical sites that might contain undiscovered materials of research value. Historical documents and personal papers from that era were often stored in locations that provided protection from fire, moisture, and other hazards that could destroy important family records, Dr. Morgan explained. German immigrants were particularly careful about preserving documentation that proved their legal status, property ownership, and business relationships, especially during periods when anti-German sentiment created concerns about their loyalty and community acceptance. As evening approached and the ice storm continued making travel impossible, Dr. Morgan's extended stay at the Crawford farm was creating opportunities for more detailed conversations about Heinrich's background and the historical significance of the farmhouse construction. Her professional expertise was providing Bill with new perspectives on his family history, while her questions about structural features and construction details were encouraging more systematic examination of the farmhouse areas that might contain historical materials or architectural features that reflected Heinrich's technical expertise and careful planning. The power outage that occurred at 7:23 p.m., caused by ice accumulation on electrical lines throughout Jefferson County, had forced Bill and Dr. Morgan to use flashlights and emergency lighting to continue their examination of the farmhouse basement and storage areas. The loss of electric lighting had actually improved their ability to notice structural details and construction features that were less obvious under normal lighting conditions, while the emergency situation had created additional motivation for understanding the capabilities and resources that Heinrich had built into their farmhouse design. "Mr. Crawford," Dr. Morgan said, as they used flashlights to examine the basement construction more carefully, "the stonework and timber framing that I can see in this lighting suggests construction techniques that were quite advanced for typical agricultural buildings. Heinrich obviously had considerable technical expertise and access to skilled craftsmen or construction knowledge that exceeded what most German immigrant farmers would have possessed during the 1890s. The power outage and their detailed examination of the basement areas were revealing construction features that Bill had never noticed or considered significant, including variations in the fieldstone wall thickness, timber framing techniques that seemed to create concealed spaces, and ventilation systems that appeared more sophisticated than typical root cellars or storage areas would require. Dr. Morgan's questions and observations were encouraging Bill to examine his farmhouse with the systematic approach that her professional training had taught her to use for historical research and architectural analysis. The combination of Dr. Morgan's professional expertise, the emergency circumstances that were extending her stay, and their detailed examination of Heinrich's construction techniques were creating conditions that would soon reveal the first indications that the Crawford farmhouse contained historical materials and architectural features that would transform Bill's understanding of his family's background while attracting the attention of federal agencies and military officials whose interest in Heinrich's legacy would exceed anything that 4 generations of Crawford farmers had ever imagined possible. But as Dr. Morgan continued her systematic examination of the basement construction and asked increasingly specific questions about Heinrich's design choices and construction techniques, neither she nor Bill had any idea that their careful investigation of structural features and storage areas would soon expose hidden compartments and concealed materials that would reveal Heinrich Crawford's true identity as an American intelligence operative whose classified contributions to World War I operations had remained secret and undiscovered for over a century, materials that would bring a military convoy to their farm at dawn and transform their desperate financial situation into a national security discovery of extraordinary historical and economic value. While Dr. Morgan continued her systematic examination of the Crawford farmhouse basement using emergency flashlight illumination, the true magnitude of what lay hidden beneath their feet remained concealed in architectural features and construction. Techniques that had been designed over a century earlier to protect secrets that would revolutionize American understanding of World War I intelligence operations. What neither Bill nor Dr. Morgan yet realized was that Heinrich Crawford's seemingly simple farmhouse contained one of the most sophisticated civilian intelligence storage and communication systems ever constructed on American soil. A network that had remained operational and undiscovered for over 80 years. The story of Heinrich's extraordinary intelligence capabilities began in 1898, when his consulting work with American steel manufacturers had brought him to the attention of Colonel George Squier, the U.S. Army's chief signal officer, who was tasked with developing America's military communications and intelligence-gathering capabilities in preparation for potential conflicts with European powers. Colonel Squier had recognized that Heinrich's technical expertise and knowledge of German industrial systems made him invaluable for understanding European military technologies and developing American countermeasures that could neutralize German technological advantages. Heinrich's recruitment into American intelligence operations had been facilitated through the Lutheran Church networks that had originally helped him emigrate from Germany, but his role had quickly expanded beyond simple technical consultation to become one of the most important German-American intelligence assets in the upper Midwest. His position required not only gathering and analyzing information about German military capabilities, but also coordinating communications between German-American immigrants who were providing intelligence services to American military officials. Throughout Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, and Michigan, the farmhouse that Heinrich had constructed beginning in 1899 had been designed not just as a family residence and agricultural operation, but as a sophisticated intelligence collection and communication center that could support activities requiring secure storage, encrypted communications, and protection from surveillance by German agents who were monitoring German-American communities for signs of disloyalty or cooperation with American military authorities. The construction techniques that Heinrich had employed reflected engineering expertise that had been developed specifically for intelligence applications. The foundation design that had so impressed Dr. Morgan included not only hidden storage compartments, but also a complex system of interconnected chambers that had been designed to accommodate radio communication equipment, document reproduction facilities, and secure meeting spaces for German-American intelligence operatives who needed locations where they could safely exchange information and coordinate their activities without risk of discovery by hostile surveillance. Heinrich's intelligence network had operated under cover of legitimate German-American business and professional associations that provided perfect camouflage for intelligence activities while maintaining the community connections and social relationships that were essential for accessing information about German political and military developments. His consulting work with American manufacturers had created opportunities for travel and communication that allowed him to coordinate intelligence operations throughout the Midwest while maintaining his cover as a successful immigrant farmer and technical consultant. The basement construction that Dr. Morgan was now examining with professional curiosity had been built to accommodate far more than agricultural storage needs. The sophisticated ventilation systems that she had noticed were actually designed to support extended human occupancy and equipment operation in spaces that might need to remain concealed for hours or days at a time. The structural reinforcement that seemed excessive for typical storage areas had been necessary to support the weight of radio transmission equipment, document reproduction machinery, and communications gear that required stable platforms and protection from vibration that could affect sensitive electronic operations. The concealed chambers that Heinrich had built into the farmhouse foundation were accessible through mechanisms that had been disguised as routine construction features, but which could be activated by individuals who understood the specific sequences and techniques that Heinrich had developed for securing access to his intelligence facilities. The oak timber framing that supported the house included sliding panels and rotating sections that could reveal entrances to hidden areas without leaving obvious traces of their existence or operation. Dr. Morgan's professional training in intelligence analysis was beginning to recognize architectural features that suggested purposes beyond typical residential or agricultural applications. But her examination was being limited by the emergency lighting and her unfamiliarity with the specific construction techniques that Heinrich had employed. Her questions about the basement design and Heinrich's construction choices were encouraging Bill to provide more detailed information about structural features that he had never considered significant, but which were creating growing professional interest in the sophisticated engineering that his great-grandfather had incorporated into their farmhouse. "Mr. Crawford," Dr. Morgan said as she examined the basement walls more carefully with her flashlight, "the precision of this stonework and the complexity of the ventilation system suggest that Heinrich had access to construction expertise and engineering knowledge that far exceeded what typical agricultural buildings would require. These features look more like the kind of construction that might be used for facilities that needed to protect sensitive materials or accommodate specialized equipment." Bill's responses to Dr. Morgan's questions were revealing family stories and construction details that were creating additional evidence of Heinrich's sophisticated technical capabilities and his unusual attention to security and concealment features that exceeded typical farming requirements. The basement areas that Bill was showing Dr. Morgan included not only the storage spaces that the family had used for agricultural purposes, but also areas that had remained unused and largely unexplored throughout 4 generations of family occupation. The most intriguing discovery of Dr. Morgan's basement examination was her identification of wall sections that appeared to have different construction techniques and materials than the surrounding areas, suggesting that Heinrich had built concealed openings or access points that had been designed to blend seamlessly with the overall construction while providing entry to areas that were not visible during casual examination. Her professional training had taught her to recognize architectural indicators of hidden spaces and security features that might have been used for protecting valuable or sensitive materials. "Dr. Morgan," Bill said, as he watched her systematic examination of the basement construction, "there are definitely areas of this basement that we've never used for storage or any other purpose. Heinrich built much more space than we've ever needed for agricultural operations, and some of the rooms have always seemed unnecessarily large or well constructed for simple storage applications." Dr. Morgan's flashlight examination was revealing construction details that were becoming increasingly intriguing from her professional perspective as someone who specialized in intelligence operations and the methods that had been used for protecting classified materials during the World War I era. The combination of sophisticated construction techniques, unusual space allocation, and Heinrich's apparent technical expertise was creating a pattern that suggested purposes beyond typical immigrant agricultural activities. The power outage that had forced their detailed flashlight examination was actually providing advantages for recognizing construction features that might not be obvious under normal lighting conditions. The directional lighting from their flashlights was creating shadows and highlighting structural details that revealed variations in construction techniques and materials that suggested Heinrich had incorporated features that were designed to remain unnoticed during routine occupancy and use of the basement areas. As Dr. Morgan continued her examination, she began to notice that certain areas of the basement seemed to have acoustic properties that were different from typical stone and timber construction, suggesting that Heinrich might have incorporated sound dampening or isolation features that would be useful for activities requiring privacy or protection from surveillance. Her professional experience with intelligence facilities had taught her to recognize architectural features that were designed to prevent eavesdropping or detection of activities that needed to remain concealed from outside observation. "Mr. Crawford," Dr. Morgan said, her voice reflecting growing professional excitement, "I'm beginning to suspect that your great-grandfather might have built this farmhouse with features that were designed for purposes beyond typical agricultural and residential needs. The construction techniques and architectural features that I'm seeing suggest someone with knowledge of security and concealment requirements that were more sophisticated than typical farming operations would require." Bill's growing understanding of Dr. Morgan's professional expertise and her specific knowledge of German-American intelligence operations was making him more receptive to her suggestions that Heinrich might have been involved in activities that had remained hidden from subsequent generations of his family. The combination of Dr. Morgan's intelligence analysis background and her systematic examination of their farmhouse was revealing possibilities about Heinrich's true identity and activities that Bill had never considered, but which were consistent with family stories about his technical expertise and unusual construction choices. The systematic examination of basement areas that Dr. Morgan was conducting was beginning to reveal specific construction features that were providing evidence of Heinrich's sophisticated engineering capabilities and his apparent preparation for activities that required security measures beyond typical agricultural and residential applications. Her professional training was allowing her to recognize architectural indicators that suggested Heinrich's farmhouse had been designed as a multi-purpose facility that could support activities requiring protection from surveillance and detection. As their examination continued, Dr. Morgan began to focus her attention on areas of the basement where the construction techniques seemed most sophisticated and where the space allocation appeared to exceed practical requirements for typical storage applications. Her systematic approach to architectural analysis was revealing features that suggested Heinrich had built concealed access points and hidden chambers that had been designed to remain undetected during routine use of the basement areas. The discovery that would change everything occurred at 9:43 p.m. when Dr. Morgan's careful examination of the basement's east wall revealed construction details that unmistakably indicated the presence of a concealed opening that had been designed to blend seamlessly with the surrounding stonework while providing access to areas that were not visible from the main basement space. Her professional experience with intelligence facilities had taught her to recognize the specific construction techniques that were used for creating secure access points that could protect sensitive materials while remaining undetectable to casual observation. "Mr. Crawford," Dr. Morgan said, her voice reflecting both professional excitement and careful control, "I believe your great-grandfather built a concealed entrance in this wall. The construction techniques and materials are consistent with methods that were used during the early 1900s for creating secure access to hidden storage or meeting areas that needed to remain undetected by authorities or hostile surveillance." Bill's reaction to Dr. Morgan's discovery was a mixture of amazement and growing curiosity about what Heinrich might have concealed in areas of their farmhouse that had remained undiscovered throughout 4 generations of family occupation. The possibility that their basement contained hidden chambers and concealed materials was both exciting and somewhat overwhelming for someone who had spent his entire life believing that Heinrich had been a simple German immigrant farmer with no secrets or hidden activities. Dr. Morgan's professional training and her systematic approach to intelligence analysis were essential for understanding how to safely access the concealed areas that she had identified without damaging the sophisticated mechanisms that Heinrich had built into the farmhouse construction. Her experience with World War I-era intelligence facilities provided her with knowledge about the specific techniques and precautions that would be necessary for investigating hidden chambers that might contain materials requiring careful handling and preservation. The process of accessing Heinrich's concealed storage areas required understanding the specific mechanisms that he had incorporated into the basement construction, including the sequence of operations and the particular techniques that would activate the concealed openings without triggering any security features that might have been designed to protect the contents from unauthorized access. Dr. Morgan's professional expertise provided the systematic approach that was necessary for safely investigating areas that had remained undisturbed for over a century. The concealed chamber that Dr. Morgan and Bill accessed through Heinrich's ingeniously designed entrance system exceeded their most optimistic expectations about what Heinrich might have hidden in his farmhouse. The space was larger than either had anticipated, with sophisticated ventilation and moisture control systems that had preserved materials and equipment in remarkable condition despite their century-long concealment. The chamber contained not only document storage facilities, but also radio communication equipment, document reproduction machinery, and organizational systems that revealed the scope and sophistication of Heinrich's intelligence operations. The initial examination of Heinrich's concealed chamber revealed evidence of intelligence activities that had been far more extensive and sophisticated than anything Dr. Morgan had encountered during her professional research into German-American intelligence operations. The equipment and materials that Heinrich had accumulated and preserved represented one of the most complete and well-documented examples of World War I-era civilian intelligence facilities that had ever been discovered in America, providing insights into operational techniques and organizational methods that had remained unknown to contemporary intelligence historians. The documents that filled Heinrich's storage systems included not only his own intelligence reports and operational materials, but also correspondence, technical specifications, and strategic planning materials that provided evidence of German-American intelligence networks that had operated throughout the Midwest with far greater sophistication and effectiveness than historians had previously understood. The preservation of these materials was extraordinary, with Heinrich's environmental control systems having maintained document quality that would allow detailed analysis and historical research. Dr. Morgan's professional assessment of Heinrich's concealed intelligence facility was revealing capabilities and organizational sophistication that exceeded anything she had encountered during her years of research into German-American intelligence operations. The combination of technical equipment, document preservation, and operational materials suggested that Heinrich had been not just a minor intelligence asset, but a major coordinator and technical specialist whose contributions to American intelligence capabilities had been far more significant than any previously discovered evidence had indicated. But the most extraordinary discovery in Heinrich's concealed chamber was a comprehensive archive of German military intelligence that Heinrich had obtained through his networks and preserved for American military officials, including detailed information about German strategic planning, weapons development, and operational techniques that would be invaluable for contemporary understanding of World War I intelligence operations and German military capabilities that had shaped the conduct and outcome of the war. The radio communication equipment that Heinrich had installed in his concealed chamber included sophisticated transmission and receiving capabilities that would have allowed him to maintain contact with intelligence networks throughout the Midwest, and potentially with American military officials in Washington, D.C., and other major cities where German-American intelligence coordination was being managed by federal agencies. The preservation of this equipment provided extraordinary insights into the technical capabilities and operational methods that had been available to civilian intelligence operatives during the World War I era. Dr. Morgan's growing understanding of Heinrich's intelligence activities and the scope of materials that he had preserved was creating professional excitement about discoveries that would revolutionize historical understanding of German-American intelligence cooperation and the sophisticated networks that had supported American military operations during World War I. The materials that Heinrich had preserved represented not just individual intelligence contributions, but evidence of systematic intelligence operations that had remained unknown to contemporary historians and intelligence officials. As Dr. Morgan and Bill continued their examination of Heinrich's concealed facility and began to understand the scope and sophistication of the intelligence materials that he had preserved, they were beginning to realize that their discovery would attract the attention of federal agencies and military officials whose interest in Heinrich's legacy would exceed anything that contemporary intelligence historians had ever encountered. The materials that Heinrich had protected for over a century represented not just historical curiosities, but active intelligence resources that would be valuable for contemporary understanding of German strategic planning and operational techniques that remained relevant for current national security applications. But Dr. Morgan and Bill had no idea that the intelligence materials they were discovering in Heinrich's concealed chamber would be recognized by federal agencies as containing information that was still classified at the highest levels of national security, materials that would require immediate military intervention and specialized handling procedures that would bring a convoy of federal officials to their farm at dawn, transforming their historical discovery into a contemporary national security operation of extraordinary significance and economic value. By 11:17 p.m., as Dr. Morgan continued her systematic examination of Heinrich's concealed intelligence chamber, the true magnitude of what lay hidden beneath the Crawford farmhouse was becoming clear to someone whose professional training had prepared her to recognize the extraordinary historical and contemporary significance of what they had discovered. What neither Bill nor Dr. Morgan yet understood was that Heinrich Crawford's intelligence archive contained not just historical documents, but active intelligence materials that were still classified at the highest levels of national security, including detailed information about Nazi infiltration networks that had been established decades before World War II even began. Dr. Morgan's professional assessment of the documents and materials in Heinrich's hidden chamber was revealing intelligence capabilities and operational sophistication that exceeded anything she had encountered during her years of research into German-American intelligence operations. The preservation quality of Heinrich's archive was extraordinary, with his environmental control systems having maintained document legibility and equipment functionality that would allow immediate analysis and operational use by contemporary intelligence agencies. The most shocking discovery occurred when Dr. Morgan examined a series of sealed document containers that Heinrich had labeled with coding systems that her Defense Intelligence Agency training had taught her to recognize as indicating materials of extraordinary sensitivity and potential contemporary relevance. These containers held intelligence reports and strategic analyses that Heinrich had prepared during the early 1920s, documenting German political movements and military preparations that would later become the foundation of Nazi Germany's expansion and intelligence operations. "Mr. Crawford," Dr. Morgan said, her voice reflecting both professional amazement and growing concern about the implications of their discovery, "your great-grandfather was documenting German political and military developments that preceded Nazi Germany by over a decade. These materials contain information about German strategic planning and intelligence networks that remained active long after World War I ended, including detailed documentation of German agents and sympathizers who were establishing operational capabilities throughout America." The documents that Dr. Morgan was examining included Heinrich's detailed reports about German-American organizations and individuals who were maintaining connections to German political movements during the 1920s and early 1930s, providing intelligence, assessments about potential security threats and espionage networks that posed dangers to American national security decades before most American officials recognized the extent of German intelligence penetration in American communities. Heinrich's intelligence archive included not only his own analytical reports, but also original German documents that he had obtained through his networks, including communication intercepts, organizational charts, and strategic planning materials that provided unprecedented insights into German intelligence operations and political movements that would eventually become Nazi Germany's espionage and sabotage capabilities in America. But the discovery that would transform their situation from historical curiosity to national security emergency was contained in a specially secured section of Heinrich's archive that Dr. Morgan accessed at 12:43 a.m. This section contained documents that Heinrich had labeled as Priority National Security, Immediate Action Required, in both English and German, materials that he had apparently been preparing to transmit to American intelligence officials when his sudden death in 1923 had prevented completion of his final intelligence mission. The documents in Heinrich's priority security section included detailed intelligence about German sabotage plans targeting American infrastructure, weapons manufacturing, and strategic resources that had been developed during the early 1920s. As part of German preparation for future conflicts with America. These materials documented specific locations, methods, and personnel involved in German sabotage networks that had been established throughout the Midwest and other regions of America. Intelligence that would be invaluable for contemporary counterintelligence and homeland security operations. "Mr. Crawford," Dr. Morgan said, her professional training now overriding her excitement as she recognized the national security implications of their discovery, "I need to contact my agency immediately. These materials contain intelligence about German sabotage networks and espionage operations that could still be relevant for contemporary national security. Some of the individuals and organizations that Heinrich documented may have descendants or successor organizations that pose current threats to American security." Dr. Morgan's professional assessment was recognizing that Heinrich's intelligence, archive contained information that was not just historically significant, but potentially critical for contemporary national security applications. The detailed documentation of German agent networks, sabotage plans, and espionage operations that Heinrich had preserved could provide insights into intelligence threats and security vulnerabilities that might still exist in American communities and infrastructure systems. The emergency telephone call that Dr. Morgan placed to the Defense Intelligence Agency's 24-hour operations center at 1:15 a.m. initiated a sequence of events that would bring federal law enforcement, military intelligence specialists, and national security officials to the Crawford farm with an urgency and scope that reflected the extraordinary significance of Heinrich's intelligence legacy. Dr. Morgan's preliminary report to her supervisors about the discovery of classified World War I-era intelligence materials and potentially active German sabotage documentation had triggered emergency protocols for handling discoveries of national security significance. The response from Dr. Morgan's DIA supervisors was immediate and comprehensive, involving coordination with the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, the Department of Homeland Security's Infrastructure Protection Office, and military intelligence. Agencies that specialized in historical intelligence analysis and contemporary threat assessment. The preliminary information that Dr. Morgan provided about Heinrich's archive had convinced federal officials that the Crawford farm contained materials that required immediate professional assessment and secure handling procedures. Bill Crawford's reaction to Dr. Morgan's explanation about the national security significance of their discovery was a mixture of amazement, concern, and growing realization that his family's desperate financial situation was about to be transformed by government interest in Heinrich's intelligence legacy that would exceed anything he had ever imagined possible. The prospect of federal agencies arriving at his farm with equipment and personnel for analyzing classified intelligence materials was both exciting and overwhelming for someone who had spent his entire life believing that Heinrich had been a simple immigrant farmer. The federal response to Dr. Morgan's report began arriving at the Crawford farm at 5:47 a.m. when a convoy of black SUVs and specialized equipment vehicles approached their property with the kind of operational efficiency and security protocols that reflected the extraordinary sensitivity of materials that required immediate professional analysis and protection from potential security threats. The convoy included FBI counterintelligence specialists, DIA historical analysis experts, Department of Homeland Security infrastructure protection specialists, and military intelligence personnel whose expertise in German intelligence operations made them essential for properly evaluating Heinrich's archive. The leader of the federal response team was Director James Sullivan of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, a 30-year veteran of intelligence operations who had specialized in German and Eastern European intelligence threats throughout his career. Director Sullivan's preliminary briefing about the Crawford farm discovery had convinced him that Heinrich's intelligence archive represented one of the most significant counterintelligence discoveries in recent American history, with potential implications for understanding historical threats and identifying contemporary security vulnerabilities. Mr. Crawford, Director Sullivan said, as federal specialists began establishing secure analysis facilities in the Crawford farmhouse basement, your great-grandfather's intelligence archive appears to contain materials that could be invaluable for contemporary national security operations. The preliminary assessment that Dr. Morgan has provided suggests that Heinrich preserved intelligence about German operations and networks that remained unknown to American authorities for over a century. The systematic analysis of Heinrich's intelligence archive that federal specialists conducted during the following 3 days exceeded all expectations about the scope and significance of materials that had been preserved in the Crawford farmhouse. The combination of Heinrich's detailed intelligence reports, original German documents, and comprehensive documentation of sabotage networks provided insights into German intelligence operations that revolutionized American understanding of historical threats while identifying security vulnerabilities that required immediate attention from contemporary agencies. The economic assessment of Heinrich's intelligence archive was conducted by Dr. Patricia Chen, a senior analyst from the CIA's Intelligence Valuation Office, who specialized in determining the financial value of intelligence materials for government acquisition and compensation purposes. Dr. Chen's preliminary assessment indicated that Heinrich's archive contained intelligence materials that were worth approximately $47 million to American intelligence agencies based on their historical significance, contemporary relevance, and the costs that would be required to obtain equivalent information through current intelligence operations. Mr. Crawford, Dr. Chen explained during her preliminary briefing about the economic value of Heinrich's archive. Intelligence materials of this historical significance and contemporary relevance are extremely rare and valuable for government agencies that need to understand historical threats and identify current security vulnerabilities. The detailed documentation and preservation quality of your great-grandfather's archive makes it invaluable for contemporary intelligence analysis and strategic planning. But the most extraordinary discovery in Heinrich's archive was revealed during the detailed analysis conducted by Dr. Sarah Kim, a specialist in German intelligence operations from the National Security Agency's Historical Intelligence Office. Dr. Kim's examination of Heinrich's most sensitive materials revealed that he had documented German sabotage plans that included specific targeting of American infrastructure and weapons manufacturing facilities that remained strategically important for contemporary national defense, making his intelligence archive not just historically significant, but operationally critical for current security planning. The sabotage plans that Heinrich had documented included detailed information about German agent networks that had been established in Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, and other Midwest states, with organizational structures and operational methods that could provide insights into security vulnerabilities that might still exist in American communities and infrastructure systems. The preservation of these materials provided American intelligence agencies with information that could be essential for identifying and neutralizing contemporary threats that might have historical connections to the networks that Heinrich had documented. The federal government's compensation offer for acquiring Heinrich's intelligence archive was presented to Bill Crawford on February 28, 2024, by Director Sullivan and Dr. Chen, who explained that the Defense Intelligence Agency was authorized to provide immediate compensation of $25 million for exclusive access to Heinrich's materials, followed by annual consultation fees of $2.3 million. For Bill's cooperation with ongoing analysis and research projects that would require his assistance and access to the Crawford property. Mr. Crawford, Director Sullivan explained, the intelligence materials that your great-grandfather preserved represent national security assets that are essential for protecting American interests and understanding historical threats that could affect contemporary security planning. The government's compensation reflects both the extraordinary value of these materials and our appreciation for your family's contribution to American national security. The compensation agreement that Bill Crawford signed with the Defense Intelligence Agency not only provided immediate resolution to his family's financial crisis, but established the Crawford Farm as a permanent historical research facility that would be supported by federal funding while remaining under his family's ownership and management. The agreement included provisions for Martha's employment as facility coordinator, ensuring that both Bill and Martha would have stable income and meaningful work for the remainder of their lives. The transformation of the Crawford farm from struggling dairy operation to federal intelligence research facility attracted national media attention that highlighted both the extraordinary historical discovery and the family's inspiring story of financial crisis transformed into national service and economic security. Bill Crawford's interviews with major news networks emphasized his amazement at Heinrich's hidden legacy, while expressing gratitude for government recognition and compensation that had saved not only their farm, but provided opportunities for contributing to American national security. Dr. Rebecca Morgan's role in recognizing and facilitating the discovery of Heinrich's intelligence archive led to her promotion to senior intelligence analyst and her assignment as director of the Heinrich Crawford Intelligence Research Institute, which was established at the Crawford farm to continue analysis of the materials and coordinate research into German-American intelligence operations. Dr. Morgan's expertise and her personal connection to the discovery made her the ideal candidate for leading ongoing research that would require years of detailed analysis and historical investigation. The Heinrich Crawford Intelligence Research Institute became one of America's premier facilities for historical intelligence analysis, attracting researchers and analysts from universities and government agencies throughout the world who were interested in studying German intelligence operations and counterintelligence techniques that had shaped the conduct and outcome of both world wars. The Institute's research programs provided new insights into intelligence operations and national security threats that influenced contemporary security policies and strategic planning. Martha Crawford's role as Institute coordinator utilized her administrative experience and her knowledge of the Crawford property to support research operations while maintaining the farm's agricultural heritage and community connections. Her position provided not only stable employment, but also meaningful work that contributed to national security while preserving the family legacy and rural lifestyle that had shaped their identity for over a century. The dairy farming operation that had threatened the Crawford family with financial ruin was transformed into a sustainable agricultural demonstration program that showcased environmentally responsible farming methods while supporting the Institute's research mission and maintaining the property's agricultural character. The integration of intelligence research and sustainable agriculture made the Crawford farm a unique facility that attracted visitors and researchers interested in both historical intelligence operations and modern agricultural techniques. 6 months after the discovery of Heinrich's intelligence archive, Bill Crawford was invited to Washington, D.C., where he received the Director's Award from the Central Intelligence Agency in recognition of his family's extraordinary contribution to American national security and intelligence capabilities. The ceremony, attended by senior officials from multiple intelligence agencies, honored not only Heinrich's intelligence service, but also Bill's cooperation and support for ongoing research that was providing valuable insights into historical and contemporary security threats. Mr. Crawford, said CIA Director Sarah Johnson during the award ceremony, your great-grandfather's intelligence service and your family's cooperation with our research efforts represent the best traditions of American patriotism and public service. The materials that Heinrich preserved have provided our agencies with intelligence capabilities and historical insights that are essential for protecting American interests and understanding the threats that our nation has faced throughout its history. The financial transformation of the Crawford family's situation exceeded their most optimistic dreams about resolving their agricultural crisis. The immediate compensation of $25 million, combined with annual consultation fees and Martha's employment with the Institute, provided economic security that would support not only their current needs, but also educational opportunities for their children and grandchildren, while ensuring that the Crawford property would remain in family ownership for future generations. Bill and Martha Crawford's decision to establish the Crawford Family Educational Foundation using a portion of their government compensation created scholarship programs for rural students interested in pursuing careers in intelligence analysis, historical research, and national security studies. The Foundation's programs provided educational opportunities for young people from agricultural communities while supporting research into German-American immigration and intelligence operations that continued Heinrich's legacy of contributing to American security and historical understanding. The ongoing research at the Heinrich Crawford Intelligence Research Institute continued to reveal new insights into German intelligence operations and American counterintelligence capabilities that influenced contemporary security policies and strategic planning. The detailed analysis of Heinrich's archive provided information about historical threats and operational techniques that remained relevant for understanding contemporary security challenges and developing effective responses to evolving intelligence threats. 3 years after the discovery of Heinrich's intelligence archive, the Crawford farm had become an internationally recognized center for intelligence research and historical analysis, hosting conferences and research programs that attracted scholars and analysts from universities and government agencies throughout the world. The Institute's research contributions had influenced academic understanding of intelligence operations while providing practical insights that enhanced contemporary security capabilities and strategic planning. The transformation of Bill Crawford's life from struggling dairy farmer facing foreclosure to guardian of one of America's most significant intelligence discoveries, represented one of the most dramatic personal reversals in recent American history. But Bill's response to his changed circumstances reflected the values and perspectives that had shaped 4 generations of Crawford farmers who understood that extraordinary opportunities carried responsibilities to family, community, and nation. The story of how an elderly farmer's act of kindness during an ice storm led to the discovery of classified intelligence materials worth $47 million became legendary throughout Wisconsin and the intelligence community, inspiring other families to investigate their own historical legacies while demonstrating how individual acts of hospitality and cooperation could contribute to national security and historical understanding in ways that exceeded anyone's expectations. Emma, Wisconsin's educational programs now include curriculum about the Heinrich Crawford discovery as an example of how German-American immigrants contributed to American national security while maintaining their cultural heritage and community connections. The story serves as inspiration for students interested in intelligence careers while demonstrating the importance of preserving family history and understanding the complex legacies that immigrant families have contributed to American security and prosperity. Today, the Crawford Farm continues to operate as both an active intelligence research facility and a working agricultural demonstration program, proving that historical preservation and contemporary research can coexist with traditional, rural lifestyles and community values. The Crawford family's story provides a model for how extraordinary discoveries can be transformed into opportunities that benefit not only individual families, but contribute to national security and historical understanding. The legacy of Heinrich Crawford's intelligence service and the discovery of his hidden archive continues to influence American understanding of intelligence operations and immigrant contributions to national security. While the Crawford family's cooperation with government research demonstrates how individual citizens can contribute to protecting American interests while preserving their family heritage and community connections. In the end, the story of how Bill Crawford's desperate financial crisis led to the discovery of his great-grandfather's extraordinary intelligence legacy proves that sometimes our greatest challenges create the circumstances that reveal our most valuable assets, and that the combination of human kindness, professional expertise, and historical preservation can unlock treasures that exceed our most optimistic dreams, while contributing to causes that benefit entire nations and future generations. The ice storm that had threatened to destroy the Crawford family's agricultural legacy instead became the catalyst for discoveries that would secure their future, while revealing that their simple farmhouse had been home to one of America's most important intelligence operatives, whose hidden contributions to national security would finally receive the recognition and appreciation that Heinrich Crawford's extraordinary service had deserved for over a century. What secrets might be hidden in your family's history? Like and subscribe for more incredible discovery stories that prove ordinary people can make extraordinary contributions to their communities and their nation.